Oi, welcome to American Air Wargaming. This is a battle report from Modulorka, the Orky skirmish wargame published by Mr. Modulork. My opponent and I started by randomly selecting a battlefield, primary and secondary mission, battlefield condition, and a secret event to be revealed at the end of turn 2. Like usual, we only chose among the battlefields supporting 30 points per side forces and primary missions which only last 4 turns. We play over our lunch break, and that setup fits nicely over that time period. For our battlefield, we got the walls with the Eye of the Storm condition. This adds a 1 inch per turn barrier around the edge of the board. Any model caught in that barrier gets downed automatically. Our primary mission was supply drops, where victory points would be dropping from the sky every turn onto random quadrants of the board. The secondary mission was secret loot, where one player would get the opportunity to secretly allocate victory points to an objective marker. And of course we drew an event card, but that wasn't going to be revealed until the end of turn 2. Keeping things rolling from my last game, I wanted to get the final Modulorka Zombies survival on the table. So my leader was Jefe, with his mecha saw and Boomstick, which is just a rifle supported by a passive ability. I had another lad also with a mecha saw and a pistol. Then, in contrast to the loud lads with saws, I brought 2 sneaky lads with Spekial Opz gear, pistols, and bludges. I figured that my saw lads would rush up while the sneakers would skulk around going after objectives and trying to get sneak attacks. My opponent was trying a slightly different approach. They had an Alphahunter on Wurmbanshee, a 20-point model that took up 2/3 of their list. The other 10 points were taken up by 5 Hun-Gobz with bludges and pistols. They have the special ability Wrath of Khans, which allows them to always counter a melee attack, even if they have already activated, or even if they're downed, or even out. The other boss-sized orc in this picture is just the model that would be used if the Alphahunter got dismounted. This time we were actually playing on an appropriately sized map, after dozens of games on a wrong-sized one. The plastic bin lid marked the horizontal limit. We were very high-tech here. Then we built up the walls and added some additional scattered terrain to fill out the board. My opponent won the roll-off and was responsible for setting up the secret loot secondary mission. Since we didn't have our normal objective markers, we decided to use the next best thing: tanks. The red and green tanks were placed on the board, not in the deployment zone and not too close to each other. 3 victory points were distributed across them. One of the markers could have 3 or 2, and the other one would have whatever is left. I wouldn't know which point would be worth controlling in the endgame until the beginning of turn 3. Then we got started placing our forces down. With fewer models, I ran out of drops first and had to put down Jefe before I knew for sure where the big Alphahunter was going. Fortunately for me, maybe, he did go down on the same side as Jefe, so we'd likely see those two get stuck in. The gobs were mostly distributed across the sides, and my forces were split. Jefe and 1 commando on one side, and the saw lad and the other commando on the other side. So then we got underway. My opponent had the initiative, so they started us off. For the first turn, the loot drops were in 2 board quadrants, one close to my lads, and the other one close to the Hun-Gobz. The first few activations were fairly cagey, just moving up and snagging the loot points. However, I knew that I would be getting the initiative in turn 2, so I pushed up to Jefe to be ready to charge into the Alphahunter. While they were staring each other down, though, a Hun-Gobz popped out and managed to hit the Jefe with a pistol shot for a pair of damage. And another one made a long bomb shot as well. This was not great for me. Jefe was already at half health before even getting a single attack off. But that's how the turn wrapped up. My sneaky lads were also in Overwatch, hoping to catch one of those sneaky gobs. Though in Modulorka you have to decide to shoot before you know if you're in range or not, and those pistols only have a 12-inch range, so that can be risky. But now it was time for turn 2, and I was first up. Well, actually, the loot drop was first up. It was in the quadrant currently occupied by both sides' leaders and Hun-Gobz. So the drop needed to shift in order to accommodate the requirement of not being closer than 3 inches to any models. Activating Jefe first, I had a decision to make. Take a shot with a Boomstick, which had an almost guaranteed 4 damage, or charge in and melee with a mecha saw, which could potentially do 8 damage if I critted on both of the saw's attacks. Since Jefe was already pretty banged up, I figured I needed to take a risk and go for the chance of big damage. Unfortunately, I only got 1 hit through, and it wasn't a crit, so only 2 damage, and even one of those got blocked by the Wurmbanshee's armor. And then, of course, the Alphahunter countered and easily landed both of their 2 counterattacks, dropping Jefe down. When you gamble big, you gotta be ready to lose big, I guess. One of the Hun-Gobz moved up and tried to take a shot at my commando, but missed. He fired back with Overwatch, but also missed. Real proper orky shooting there. Then my mecha saw lad moved up and carved up one of the Hun-Gobz, taking it down in one spin and out in the next. However, that Wrath of Khans rule allowed the little bugger to stab 2 points of damage into my lad in retaliation. And then another one of the blighters came in from behind and knocked my lad down with another melee strike. My commando moved up and shot down one of the gobs, so we would at least be even on down models, but that was not a race I wanted to be tied in. One of the other Hun-Gobz snagged the victory points that had landed this turn, and I tried to shoot him down with my other commando, but missed. Which wrapped up turn 2. I was not feeling super confident at this point, with half my orcs out of commission already. Fortunately, I hadn't made a huge blunder, and was safely out of the eye of the storm this turn. I'd need to make sure to move that lad before I'd encroach further, though. As it was the start of turn 3, my opponent needed to reveal the distribution of victory points for the secret loot objective. Unsurprisingly, they had stashed all of the points in the objective, which the massive monster was standing right next to. Not a bad strategy there. So the other point was worthless to control. This turn, we got another double drop of points. One of the drops was close to my commando, and the other one was near the scrum over the worthless objective point. Unfortunately, my commando didn't even get a chance to go for the points, as he was charged and knocked down by the Alphahunter. My remaining commando moved up and tried to claim the other pile, but couldn't quite make it there in one move. He at least shot down one of the Hun-Gobz carrying the other victory points to force him to drop them. Then we remember that we were actually supposed to reveal the event card at the end of turn 2, and figured it was better to do it then than not at all. The event was Slip and Slide, where on-foot and mountain models needed to move an extra d3 inches after moving in the same direction as their last movement. We figured that for the Alphahunter, he would have just landed on my commando, so it didn't matter. But it also meant that my commando, who had just activated, would have kept sliding and ended up smacking into a wall. Reading through the rules later, this should have given him a pin token as well, but it didn't make a difference in the end, since he ended up getting pinned anyways by the first Hun-Gobz, who moved up and stabbed 2 points of damage into him. Fortunately, the second one missed. This wrapped up turn 3, and with only one model left on the board with 2 HP left, things were looking even more dire for me, even though I would get to activate first. We forgot to roll for falling victory points because we'd done the math and determined that it didn't really matter. In order to make this turn even remotely interesting, we agreed on a house rule. If a model is carrying mission objects, like the victory tokens, and they are knocked down by a melee attack, those objects don't just drop on the ground, they are taken by the attacker. This meant that my commando had a chance to KO one of the gobs and steal their points, and maybe bring the scores a little bit closer. Of course, this plan didn't work out as I rolled a 1 and flubbed the attack. Fortunately for me, so did the 2 Hun-Gobz. It was misses all around. Not needing to worry about anything anymore, the Alphahunter moved up into controlling range of the objective point, but just outside the eye of the storm effect to avoid being downed. With the 3 points from the secret loot and 2 Hun-Gobz each holding 2 points, they came up to a grand total of 7 points. Only my poor commando, bruised and still standing, brought me 2 points for a decidedly one-sided victory to my opponent, which brought the game to a close. I knew the Alphahunter was going to be tough, but I was surprised by how punchy the Hun-Gobz were. Since they have Clap of 3, they're just as good as a regular lad in melee. They also don't have the feeble or fragile keywords, so they don't get taken out quite as easily either. And with a Wrath of Khan's ability, they can strike back even when they're taken out. All that for just 2 points each. That's quite a bargain. That's it for now, and don't forget, we's the best.